Do you guys listen to Jamahal Hill? Jamahal Hill has started YouTube. I guess you call it a podcast, but like on YouTube. It's unbelievable. His breakdown and his assessments, what he sees, it's unbelievable. The best fight mind that I have ever been around is Dominic Cruz. And there's a meaningful gap. The next best fight mind I have ever been around is Kenny Florian. But Jamahal Hill is definitely entering that conversation of the greats. Truly, it is. I was blown away. He gave an assessment of Saturday's card. And he was breaking down the entire main card and not only letting you know who won, it was and why. Here's the strategy invoked by the opponent, and here's why that was a problem for the guy that got beat. I could not believe how he views the sport. Because I've never been convinced or really satisfied that the Jamahal Hill story has been told. For Jamahal Hill, who was a college basketball player, we've seen many walks of life, multiple guys that had cups of coffee in the NFL, just for example, right? These great big, multiple guys that had meaningful careers in college on the gridiron. So now we understand strength, explosiveness, we understand contact, things like this that would carry over, things where we could reasonably believe, yes, that person would go on to be a cage fighter. But we've never seen, and this is one of the reasons that bothers me, we've never seen a scholarship college basketball player come over into MMA. And let me stop you right there. I didn't say go on to be champion. I didn't say go on to have like a 16-1, something crazy as Jamal's record. I think that might even be at 16-1. To have the intellect, right? We haven't seen people from that, and I feel that it should have been more credit. I feel that the basketball community should greatly be supporting him. I feel many people should be looking in that direction. Oh my goodness. When Jamal gave the belt up because he was hurt, the fact that he was playing a basketball game, he had all these people that were playing against him who weren't hurt and also who didn't understand basketball. The best and most decorated amongst them is the guy that ends up getting hurt. Like, just for having a story, that's a very fascinating one. And he gave the belt up, and he did it because he had the opportunity to win that belt because somebody else had given the belt up. So we wanted to pass it back. Those are three things that are very interesting that I don't like, haven't been part of Jamal's story and told at a higher level. But how did a basketball player make it? How did he make it in such a short period of time? What even motivated him to come from a sport where if you touch somebody, it's a foul? If you touch them enough times, you get enough fouls, they will eject you. And he goes from that environment to the most contact sport that's ever been created. Like, I just find it to be a fascinating thing. So then when I listened to his breakdowns, I even hit rewind. I said, what? And I used to have that same experience when I would work with Dominic Cruz. I would do segments on television with Dominic Cruz, and I would think, man, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. How did he become the world champion? I would sit there and I would smile and I would nod and I would be polite because we're working together. I think, what a doofus. Then we go to commercial break and we'd have about 3 minutes off. And during the commercial break, I'd be thinking, why did he say that? God, what a dumb thing to say. Why does Dominic believe this? How did Dominic become so good misunderstanding this sport so much? It would be on commercial break later, playing it through, repeating to myself, playing it through. Why would he say this? Listen to what he said, that I would then understand it. What Dominic was saying was so advanced, I didn't understand it at the moment. I needed to reflect on it later. And that happened to me multiple times working with Dominic. He was so good, I had to hear it again before I realized. And I was having that same experience with Jamal. I have never had that experience with anybody until I listened to Joe. I had to rewind it. He was giving a breakdown as to what the problem was. He was giving a breakdown that the opponent that had success must have noticed on film, put a strategy together, and went out and implemented it into a game plan. And he would break it down from there. But I just couldn't believe how intelligent he was on a sport. And when you combine the idea that it's a shocking factor that he even did the sport in the first place. So he gets to the main event. And the main event was not aesthetically pleasing to watch. I have never loved the idea of doing 5 rounds in a main event just because you're the main event. You now have a different sport. Any sport that you can think of, you have a different sport if you mess with the time limits. The team that was going to win the Super Bowl, if just before the Super Bowl we announce it's 3 quarters, is going to change the odds and change who you believe is going to win. If we announce it's going to be 6 quarters, you have completely changed the game that you're out doing. But you could break that down into any sport you want. When you mess with the time, you just changed the breakdowns, the perceptions, and ultimately the outcomes. I just don't love that concept. So when somebody does say that Almeida taking Derrick Lewis down, rinse and repeat, holding him there, advancing position, not doing a lot with it in terms of gaining towards finishing the match. Those things are really true, but those things also need to be true. If you're not fully confident that you're going to succeed with finishing that match, you must, as an athlete, defer to preserving energy so that you don't run out of it and all of a sudden the other guy comes from behind and gets the better of you. If you ever try to win by knockout, you will not win a decision. It's important that you understand that. Because when I look at the Almeida and Derrick Lewis fight, I had a few different takeaways. There are not a lot of men that have ever been able to take Derrick Lewis down essentially at will. And at will, I will define as when they go for a takedown, they get it. There doesn't ensue a scramble. You don't go for a takedown. A scramble is cruise. You're on your feet. You're back to trading. You're back to seeing an opening. You go for another takedown. You switch from 1 to 2. You push them in the fence. You got your underhook. You pull them off. You go to a body lock. You hit a trip, and now you've got him down. That's a very different scenario than what Almeida was doing, which is when I go for my takedown, by the time this exchange is done, I will have the takedown. Every single time. It was just interesting. I think that Almeida really showed he is a legitimate player in the heavyweight division. And he was not somebody prior to this fight who you would have quite put into that category, which somewhat has isolated itself to Surreal, to Tom, to Pavlovich. It looks like, no, there's other guys. There's other guys that need to be considered. There's other guys with an opportunity to break into that upper echelon. And I don't know that I love the concept that Almeida, who went out there and was dominant over a beast. Derrick Lewis has beaten Francis Ngannou. To put that in perspective for you, I don't know that I love the idea of knocking or perhaps taking an opportunity in the future away from Almeida because you deemed him to be boring. I don't know how or why we're doing 5 rounds in a main event. I don't know. And you could go back over history and you could find some 5-rounders that were amazing. You will be able to come forward with the Rory McDonald, Robbie Lawler fights. And there's many more. You still have a different sport. You're still doing something else. You're still now playing a marathon mindset of conditioning where an athlete must extend He's going to leave that ring completely exhausted either way, whether it's in 50 minutes or 25 minutes. If he's going to throw 300 punches, for example, he's still going to throw 300 punches. He will just do it in the 15 minutes as opposed to stretching those out to the 25 minutes. So you inherently are asking for, and you should expect, a more dull match. I just think there's a real conversation there as to how and why. And I think Almeida did some really incredible things. And I think that the breakdown that Jamahal gave to that entire card really helped me to understand his intelligence for sport, for what he's looking at. His understanding of Billy is almost that of a natural. But that helps to answer the question as to how a scholarship basketball player went over to MMA and became the world champion.